Ashes and echoes. The stars didn't care that humanity was dying. They hung there, cold and bright, same as they'd always been. But to the survivors drifting through the wreckage of Colony 7, those stars felt like witnesses to a crime no one would ever answer for. The Ash Rain Massacre. That's what the few who lived through it called it. 7 human colonies scattered across the frontier like seeds of hope, wiped out in less than a week. The enemy came without warning, sleek vessels that moved like shadows carrying bioweapons that turned the air itself into poison. Children choked on their own breath. Mothers watched their skin blister and peel. The lucky ones died fast. The hunters came after when the screaming stopped. They walked through the ruins with scanners and blades checking for survivors. Not to save them. To finish the job. Earth never sent a fleet. No rescue, no retaliation. Just silence. Maybe they didn't know. Maybe they didn't care. Either way, it didn't matter. The colonies burned and the void swallowed their cries. But 3 souls refused to be swallowed. The ghost didn't remember his real name anymore. He'd been a freight pilot once, hauling supplies between colonies, dreaming of retirement on some green world where the air didn't taste like metal. Then the hunters found his ship. They killed his crew, his wife, his daughter, left him for dead in the cargo hold, half his face burned away by chemical fire. He woke up 3 days later alone, surrounded by corpses. The pain was unbearable, but the silence was worse. So he stopped being whoever he was before. He became something else, something sharp and hollow. A ghost. Toma was older, grizzled, built like a hauler himself. He'd been a colony engineer, spent 40 years fixing water pumps and power grids, keeping little towns alive on dead rocks. When the bioweapons hit, he was underground, fixing a coolant leak. He climbed out to find his entire settlement gone. 2,000 people reduced to shadows, burned into stone. He didn't cry, didn't pray. Just picked up his tools and started walking. Steele never spoke. No one knew if she couldn't or just wouldn't. She'd been a security officer on one of the outer stations. Military-trained, ice-cold, efficient. When the hunters came, she killed 11 of them with a broken pipe and a mining laser before they gassed the whole sector. She survived by crawling into a ventilation shaft and breathing through a filter made from her own jacket. When she emerged, covered in blood and ash, she didn't look human anymore. She looked like a weapon they met by accident or fate. Depending on who you asked, the ghost found the dread light drifting near the debris field of Colony 4. It was a mining hauler, gutted and scarred, but still operational. Barely. He dragged it into a makeshift dock using nothing but thrusters and spite. Toma showed up a week later, following distress signals that no longer meant anything. He found the ghost trying to hotwire a reactor that should have been scrapped years ago. "You're gonna blow yourself up," Toma said. "Good," the ghost replied. Toma grinned. "Not yet. Let me help." Steele arrived last. She didn't ask to join. Didn't speak, just walked onto the ship, checked the weapon systems, and started repairing them. The ghost watched her for a moment, then nodded. No words were needed. They all understood they were dead already. They were just choosing how to haunt the living. For months they drifted, scavenging, surviving. The dreadlight wasn't fast or pretty, but it was theirs. They stripped wrecks for parts, traded with smugglers for fuel, and avoided anything that looked like authority. But the anger didn't fade. It grew, festered. Every night the ghost saw his daughter's face in the stars. Toma heard the screams of his neighbors and the hum of the engines. Steele sharpened her blades in silence over and over, until they could cut shadows. Then, one day, Toma found something in the salvage, a data core encrypted military grade. It took him 3 weeks to crack it. When he did, he went pale. "Ghost," he said quietly, "you need to see this." The data core contained coordinates, supply routes, comm relay stations, all belonging to the enemy, the ones who'd burned the colonies, the ones who'd sent the hunters. The ghost stared at the screen for a long time. "We can't take them all," Toma said. "We're 3 people in a broken ship." The ghost's scarred face twisted into something that might have been a smile. "We don't need to take them all," he said. "We just need to make them bleed." Steele looked up from her workbench. She didn't speak, but her eyes said everything. "Let's hunt." Their first target was a communications relay on the edge of enemy space. Small, lightly defended. Critical. They came in silent, drifting like debris until they were close enough to strike. Steele went in first, No armor, no backup, just a blade and a thermal charge. She moved through the station like smoke, killing sentries before they could scream. The Ghost piloted the Dreadlight in a slow orbit, waiting. Toma monitored the enemy channels, listening to their confusion turn to panic. When Steele detonated the charges, the entire relay went up in a bloom of white fire. The enemy sent distress signals. No one answered. As the Dreadlight burned away into the black, the Ghost keyed open a channel, one he knew the enemy would hear. His voice was cold, empty, final. You started this war. We'll finish it. Then he cut the feed. Word spread fast. The enemy called them terrorists, pirates, ghosts. The few human survivors who heard the story called them something else. The revenants, the dead, come back to settle the score. And in the burned corners of the galaxy, where hope had died and only fury remained, a new legend was born. The fire spreads. The enemy didn't understand fear. Not yet. They'd crushed colonies, burned worlds, hunted survivors like animals. They were apex predators, sleek, efficient, untouchable. Humanity was prey, weak, scattered, finished. But prey that refuses to die becomes something else. It becomes dangerous. After the relay went dark, the enemy mobilized. They sent hunters, elite soldiers trained to track and exterminate threats. They expected to find refugees, scared, desperate, easy. They found Steele instead. She ambushed them in the wreckage of an old mining station, using the dark and the cold as weapons. The hunters had numbers, training, superior gear. But Steele had rage. She killed them one by one, silent and surgical. When the last hunter realized he was alone, he tried to run. She let him. Let him broadcast his fear across every channel. Let the enemy hear what it sounded like when their invincible soldiers begged for mercy. Then she ended him. The message was clear. You are not safe anymore. The Ghost became a phantom. He'd strike fast, vanish faster. One day he'd sabotage a fuel depot. The next he'd cripple a troop transport. He never stayed long enough to fight. He didn't need to. Every wreck he left behind was a reminder. We're still here, and we're coming for you. Toma turned the Dreadlight into a nightmare. He rigged traps, built weapons from scrap, turned every system on the ship into something lethal. The enemy learned to fear the dark, because that's where the revenants lived. They didn't fight fair. They didn't need to. The enemy had taken everything. Fair died with the colonies, but the legend grew faster than they did. Survivors heard the stories. Refugees whispered them in smuggler dens and slave pits. The revenants, 3 humans who refused to kneel, who turned grief into fire and fury into justice. Some thought it was myth, propaganda, a desperate lie to keep hope alive. Others believed, and belief was a weapon. 6 months after the first strike, the revenants hit a research station deep in enemy territory. It was heavily guarded, surrounded by minefields and patrol ships. Retry Part 2, the fire spreads, continued. 6 months after the first strike, the revenants hit a research station deep in enemy territory. It was heavily guarded, surrounded by minefields and patrol ships. Inside, the enemy was perfecting their bioweapons. The same poison that had killed the colonies. They were going to use it again. The Ghost didn't hesitate. They breached the station through a waste vent, tight, filthy, but unmonitored. Steele led the way, her blade slick with the blood of guards who died before they could sound the alarm. Toma moved behind her, planting charges on every support beam, every power conduit, every sealed lab door. The Ghost found the research database. He could have destroyed it immediately. Should have. But he took the time to upload it, sent every file, every experiment, every atrocity straight into the void, broadcasting on every frequency. Let the galaxy see what the enemy really was. Let them see what humanity had survived. When the charges blew, the station tore itself apart from the inside. Labs collapsed. Containment failed. The bioweapons the enemy had crafted so carefully turned on their creators, flooding the corridors with the same death they'd planned to unleash. The revenants were gone before the fires even started. But this time they weren't alone. 17 prisoners were in that station. Humans, test subjects, broken, scarred, barely alive. Steele found them in the lower cells. The Ghost wanted to leave them. Too slow, too vulnerable, too much risk. But Toma looked at those hollow faces and saw his neighbors, his friends, the people he couldn't save. We take them, Toma said quietly. The Ghost stared at him. They'll slow us down. Get us killed. Then we die, Toma replied. But not like cowards, Steele said nothing. But she opened the cells. They loaded the survivors onto the Dreadlight. It was crowded, chaotic, desperate. The ship groaned under the weight. The enemy fleet was closing in fast, but they made it out. Barely. And when those 17 survivors stepped off that ship in a neutral port, alive and free, they didn't just tell a story. They became one. The enemy couldn't ignore them anymore. They sent fleets, assassins, traps baited with false intelligence. They put bounties on the Revenants' heads so high that entire cartels mobilized to collect. But the Revenants had something the enemy didn't understand. They had nothing left to lose. And people with nothing left to lose don't fight to survive. They fight to hurt. Every trap the enemy set became a weapon turned against them. Every bounty hunter who came for the Revenants ended up another burned ship in the void. Every fleet sent to crush them came back smaller, if it came back at all. The enemy grew frustrated, angry, desperate, good. Let them feel what humanity felt. The turning point came at the Battle of the Hollow Gate. The enemy had fortified a strategic choke point, a massive station controlling access to 3 systems. It was the linchpin of their supply lines, impenetrable, unbreakable. The Revenants didn't care. By now they weren't alone anymore. The rescued prisoners had spread the word. Other survivors had crawled out of hiding. Smugglers, deserters, pirates, refugees, anyone with a grudge and a pulse started rallying to the legend. They called themselves the Dead Fleet. Dozens of battered ships held together by spite and scrap metal. The Ghost led them straight into hell. The battle was chaos. The enemy had superior ships, better weapons, trained crews. But the Dead Fleet had rage. They flew like people who'd already died and just forgot to stop moving. Steele boarded the station with a strike team of former prisoners. They moved like shadows, cutting through defenses, planting explosives in the reactor core. Toma coordinated the assault from the Dreadlight, his voice crackling over 100 comms at once, holding the fleet together through sheer stubbornness. And the Ghost? He flew straight into the teeth of the enemy flagship, dodging fire that should have killed him a dozen times over, drawing them away from the station, keeping their eyes on him. When the station exploded, it lit up the void like a newborn star. The enemy fleet broke, scattered, ran. And for the first time since the Ash Rain massacre, humanity didn't just survive. They won. The war didn't end that day. It never really does. But something changed. The enemy learned fear. They learned that humans, broken, scattered, supposedly defeated humans, could bite back, could bleed them, could make them pay. And across the galaxy, in hidden corners and forgotten stations, survivors who'd given up hope started to believe again. The Revenants became more than 3 people. They became an idea, a promise. You hurt us, we'll hurt you back. You tried to erase us, we'll make you remember. You started this war, we'll finish it. On the bridge of the Dreadlight, the Ghost stared out at the stars. His face was still scarred. His hands still shook sometimes. The ghosts of his family still haunted him in the dark. But he wasn't alone anymore. Toma sat at the engineering console, muttering about repairs that would take months. Steele stood at the weapon station, silent as always, sharpening a blade that never seemed to dull. Behind them, the Dead Fleet drifted in formation, battered, broken, but still flying. Still fighting? Where to next? Toma asked. The Ghost pulled up a star chart. Dozens of targets glowed red. Enemy strongholds, supply depots, command stations. So many places that needed to burn. He smiled. A cold, hollow thing that had nothing to do with joy and everything to do with purpose. Everywhere, he said. Steele looked up. She didn't speak. But for the first time she nodded, and the Dreadlight turned toward the dark, carrying the dead who refused to die, the broken who refused to stay broken, the prey who'd become predators. The stars didn't care that humanity was dying, but they were about to learn that some things refuse to go quietly into the void. Some things burn brighter in the dark. Some things take revenge.